From inside the Banner offices along the Inner Harbor, it is the Banner Baseball Show. Paul Mancano and John Meoli. We got back to Baltimore, and we are in this beautiful new podcast room setup that we have. Getting a little bit better each day. I think we have more space from the wall now. Could probably use some decor of some kind on the walls. If you're watching live on X or on YouTube, please write us a nice review. Give us a thumbs up. Write us a comment. But yeah, I mean, I think we're coming along slowly.
This is a venue to do something I've wanted to do for like 10 years since the first time I went to Sarasota.
Which is?
That picture in the bathroom of the press box of all the Orioles logos through the years is really, really cool.
Yes. Very niche content here, but yes.
I don't know who. No one
knows this other than a beat writer.
No one who listening to this will have ever seen it. I don't know where it came from. I don't know who I would ask where it came from. I don't know what I would do if I ever got it, which is to say I'm never going to get it, but like
a dog chasing cars.
Yeah, I've just wanted to know like the origins of that picture for a long time.
So
it's like to explain it, it's like every like logo and like the artist and like who the point was, and like it's pretty fascinating.
I think there's a video down the line, a Baltimore Banner sports video, TikTok down the line to be done about the Orioles logos over the years, because I think one of the original logos was designed like one of the original cartoon birds, not the face that they have now, but one of the ones where he's holding the bat was designed by an old Disney cartoonist.
Wow.
Who actually like had done a series of them and was known for this. And there's the ornithologically correct bird.
I learned that word from this.
There we
sign,
go. Yeah. And some people prefer that. I think the ornithologically correct bird is making a comeback. I think, the current logo they go with is the cartoon face. There's the cartoon like bird holding the bat. Yeah. There's the angry bird.
Yep.
And the ornithologically correct bird, I think a lot of people are saying that's retro. That's cool now.
Yeah. I remember I was in college. There was like, we were on a hockey road trip and we stopped at like a random gas station, or like one car stopped at a random gas station, and like they had all these like really old like junky hats.
Mm-hmm.
And obviously like the entire team ended up stopping at that place because they all needed one. And I got like pretty useful. I got like an ornithologically correct bird hat.
Nice.
And I got like a really nice like Golden State Warriors hat too, which
Ooh,
was
nice.
Before that was cool. Like,
when they were bad?
Yeah, when they were bad, it was just a cool hat, and then
right.
it turned into like a real hat that I couldn't tell you where it is right now. My brother probably like wore it while I was away in college and then sold it.
From like 2014 to 2020, you could have been like a real hop on the bandwagon type guy if you would want to.
Real hoops head here.
Real hoops head.
Yeah.
John, today we're going to talk, not hoops. We're going to talk baseball.
Thank God.
We're going to, yeah. Especially after how Maryland lost that game last night in college basketball. We're going to talk today about the Baltimore Orioles down in Sarasota. We are back here in Baltimore, but we were just down there in Sarasota. John did a great vibes check that he has written about on the BaltimoreBanner.com, where you can subscribe $1 for 6 months. But first, let's run through some news and notes here, John, because we've gotten about a week's worth of games so far. We've seen some good, some bad, and a lot of stuff that is not worth overreacting to. One small note that I liked, if there was one moment that sticks out to you over the past week, let me know, because we're just looking for moments here. My favorite moment is Enrique Bradfield Jr. hitting a homer. I ripped him on the pod for, wouldn't say rip, but I questioned his power on the pod. He goes out, he gets jacked in the offseason. He hit 4 homers in 108 minor league games last year, and he said, you know what? I'm going to hit a spring training ding dong, and that's what he did.
Yeah. I'm really fascinated to see what this year looks like for him. I get the sense, I think in the Baseball America rankings, I put him 6. I had him as like an everyday player. Mm-hmm. There's no bad ones of those. And, and I think it's probably the same grade as the guys who are 4 and 5 ahead of him. But like, I feel like I might have just been a little light. There was a lot of optimism towards the end of last season about the work he did when he got to Bowie. Not to give away a story, which I'm not going to do, but like there's some work he's doing down in spring training that's going to make him a more dynamic offensive player outside of hitting these home runs. Like, I think every time he does that, it will be a bonus. Like, he even considers himself, like when he compares himself to like fast players and guys who can make an impact on the bases with the Orioles now, like Jorge Mateo, Cedric Mullins, he's quick to note that like those guys can also leave the yard at any time. Like,
yeah.
And he distinguishes himself by that based on the fact that he doesn't, like, that's not the kind of player he's going to be, but there is going to be a lot of value in him doing everything he can do. And if he if he can turn on a mistake and pull it out to right field, like that's pretty sweet too.
Yeah, I mean, Jorge Mateo 2 years ago hit 4 home runs. Last year dealt with injuries, but he is not just a valuable player because of his speed and defense, but because every now and again he can go yard. And Jorge Mateo, another guy who is sneaky jacked. I mean, he's the guy that you think of him as a profile and you don't think of him as a very strong guy. He's a strong dude. And Enrique Bradfield Jr., noticing him in spring training, he bulked up. I mean, he definitely has added some bulk there. Saw a home run from Heston Kjerstad, an opposite field homer that a game was not being broadcast at all. So we're not sure it ever existed, but we did see some beat writers tweeting out video of it. So I guess it did happen.
It happened.
Look, this, we've said before, we think Heston Kjerstad's making this roster. There's no reason he shouldn't make this roster. And it's just getting fans, I think, excited to think about, okay, what can Heston Kjerstad do with a full season? Even if he is platooning a little bit with Tyler O'Neill, he's going to play a lot of games. And given the Orioles' hope in this guy, he should make the most of this opportunity.
Yeah, it's going to be really fascinating. I've said this before. The power is clearly there, but like to be that like corner slugger, like who you can like bank on in the big leagues, you have those weeks where you hit like 5 home runs in 2 weeks, and you're just like, oh my god, this guy's on fire. Like, I'm pretty sure he could do that. The guy you mentioned that he's platooning with, Tyler O'Neill, he faced Felix Bautista in his first live on Sunday. I don't remember specifically what kind of pitch it was, but he went like deep off the batter's eye off Felix, and everyone in the dugout. There was a couple of other big league hitters, and there was Cody Ashe, and everyone saw that, and you could cheer like them be like, whoa, like this is right on. That's right on. Right. That's something that Tyler O'Neill, presumably can do, but was not brought here to do. So I was pretty interested to see that, and it was just kind of like it was almost like ho hum. It was like, just like, granted, live BPs, Felix Bautista's first time facing hitters,
right?
Like not really like juice is flowing, but like that's not an easy thing to do. He took him out way out.
Yeah, and on the flip side of that, Felix Bautista getting back on the mound, hasn't pitched in a Grapefruit League game yet, but. Another positive sign. We heard from Mike Elias, Brandon Hyde, and Felix Bautista that all of them expressed optimism that he would be ready for opening day. There's still no guarantee because he's still working his way back up, but they expect him to be back at the very latest, very early into the season, a week or two into the season. It's exciting. It's exciting to think about how much better this bullpen is going to get next year with having a healthy Felix Bautista.
Yeah, there wasn't a ton of fanfare for that on Sunday when he first pitched, but I hung back and it was like I saw him like come out in his like I'm about to pitch the hitter's gear, and it was like, oh, like
did anybody do the whistle?
No, but it was like there wasn't even like a ton of like I think one player wasn't involved, was there to like watch it. It was like you realize that like. It's almost good that it's like a ho-hum thing for them that Dean Kramer's a player who was there watching, but that Felix Bautista was.
That would be ho-hum.
yeah. But this is just kind of like what he's doing. I think Brandon Hyde told the reporters down there, according to our friend Danielle Allentuck, that 7 outings-ish feels like the right number to get him like ready for the season, and like that's 2. So there's 1.5 a week. Like, there's a lot of time for him to do what he needs to do. I don't know how much will happen like in games, but I think that's pretty encouraging at this stage of spring training.
Absolutely. We'll get into kind of the vibe check that you had later on, but when I was sitting out there watching, going to the backfields, watching them take batting practice, watching this team do live batting practice, pitchers facing hitters. And I was thinking, John, about how much time we spent in the offseason talking about what this team needs, what this team needs to add, the fact that they need an ace, the fact that they needed a corner right-handed outfielder, the fact they needed bullpen help. And I was just watching like Jordan Westberg, Colton Cowser, Gunnar Henderson, Adley Rutschman take live batting practice. And it just hit me. This team is really good. I mean, it was just a nice reminder of just how much talent this team is loaded with right now, and particularly the lineup.
Yeah, and I remember you asked me early on in our regular potting experience, which we still are, but we will be only because we're going to be doing this forever.
Yeah.
Forever. Yeah. Just year-to-year contracts forever.
Just a 1+1 every year.
You asked about like whether this team had done enough in the offseason to be better than it was last year.
Yeah.
And like the answer was no, because that's not how this team is going to be better.
Sure.
Than it was last year. They're going to be better because Jordan Westberg, who was an all-star in the first half, is going to play in the second half, presumably. Ryan Mountcastle is not going to be afraid to pull the ball, and I was also going to be healthy. Like Gunnar Henderson is one of the, you can pick a number, it's in the single digits, like X best players in baseball. Like that will continue to be the case. Adley Rutschman will be better than he was. Like even if everyone doesn't, for every person that gets 10% better, one person might be 5% worse, and that still averages out to like better than they were last year as a team. And I think this is going to touch on what we're going to get to. Like they can win, or they can attack every night's game the way that they want to. And it's not going to be like, oh, they are starting a lefty, but like, do we put in Emmanuel Rivera because he's a righty? Or like, do we give Austin Slater a start because he's here? Like, there's not going to be a lot of like begrudging, like, let's do this, and like, because this is what we do. They're going to have these moments where they want to, stack a lineup with righties, or they want to be able to, maybe they lost 2 in a row and they really want to win, and like they can be aggressive and put a good reliever in the 6, 7, 8, 9.
Yeah.
Like, you can do that because you have other options and you're not going to like burn the rest of them. And that feels to me like that was part of the calculus this offseason. That's what they spent their money. That's what they spend their money on, honestly.
Yeah, it is. I mean, they made a concerted effort to get a deeper roster than what they had last year. And Brandon Hyde said at the beginning of camp, this is the deepest team that he's ever had. And I think there's really no question that that's true. I mean, you look back last year, they were really hit hard by injuries. Mike Elias wouldn't make that excuse for them not winning the division and for them getting swept out of the playoffs. But you look back at the team from 2 years ago, and that was probably the only other team that was this deep or was even close to this deep. And still there were some differences there. I mean, the team that won 101 games 2 years ago in 2023, that was a loaded team that that took the division out of nowhere, won 101 games, got the 1 seed. They had depth. They had a great infield because Jordan Westberg was having a good rookie year. It was Gunnar Henderson's first full season. It was Adley Rutschman's first full season. They were loaded. They got Aaron Hicks early on. That really added to their outfield depth when Cedric Mullins went down. But still, you had Kyle Gibson starting opening day. You still had Adam Frazier as your starting second baseman. The talent level was not as good. Grayson Rodriguez was a rookie, and we know about his rookie struggles in 2023. That was the only other team that you could say had even close to the amount of depth. But you saw how deep that team was and how it helped them win the division. I mean, there's the Yankees that year were also hit with severe injuries. And that was a large reason the Orioles were able to outlast them. And the better you do during the regular season, the higher seed you have, the higher chance you have home field advantage. That stuff matters when it comes to the playoffs. And the Orioles didn't take advantage of it that year. But you want this season to more closely resemble the 2023 season than the 2024 season. And I think you could make a case that the 2024 season was undone a lot by their lack of depth.
Yeah, and it's not, and I feel like it was around when Albert Suarez debuted last year,
which was early.
Yeah, it was early. It was like it was very early last year. I wrote something, and I think it was like one of those Yankees. Yeah, it must have been that same week. But it was that like this team's depth on the pitching side was like in the majors already, and it wasn't that like they had, Cade Povich existed and Chase McDermott existed, but like Albert Suarez was up there, and like their depth came down to the fact that like they had a lot of good pitchers in the rotation at that moment. Like Kyle Bradish and John Means were in the mix at that point. Like there wasn't a lot they were going to do otherwise that was going to save them if something happened. Like some things ended up happening. Some of them predictable given the fact that given how like PRP injections work and like how and how what it's like when you basically like need to get Tommy John right after you got Tommy John. Like some of those things you might have had an inkling about at some point in the winter, but some of them you didn't. And the Orioles, to their credit, went out and addressed that. The pitching staff had like a 6 ERA in July. So like what did they do? They went and traded for a bunch of pitchers. Unfortunately, they traded a lot of hitters that they would have been able to use at that point to make that happen, and they left themselves short. But I don't think that's going to be something they're going to be concerned about this year. But also, like you look at Nick Gordon's he's starting today down in Sarasota, and like that's a fine piece of depth to have in AAA. Like
exactly
they have they have done a good job of solidifying that part of the roster too, because you talk about the outfielders, Enrique Bradfield and Dylan Beavers and Judd Fabian, who are in camp. There's not a ton of other like AAA types that are in this organization. Taron Bauer's back, but like they needed to go out and fill those holes too, and like make sure that like if the sky does fall, like they're protected a little bit. So right. I think there was a really concerted effort to do that. And I think you can see in camp just like the amount of good players that are there who you can envision playing a role. It's like, all right, like that was the point.
Right. Yeah. You saw, I mean, they signed Tyler O'Neill pretty early in the offseason to be the replacement for Anthony Santander. They signed Gary Sanchez to be the replacement for James McCann. They add Tomoyuki Sugano as some depth to the rotation. And you could look at that and say, all right, the Orioles have, checked the boxes that they need to. Everybody came into the offseason saying they need that right-handed outfield bat. They need one other guy at least in that rotation, some depth in that rotation. They need a backup catcher. But it's the under-the-radar moves that they made later in the offseason that they're hoping are going to pay dividends. That come July, when they're hit with a rash of injuries, we're not thinking too much about Dylan Carlson because maybe he's in AAA. But they signed Dylan Carlson. They signed Ramon Laureano. They have much more outfield depth at this point so that they won't have to find that guy in the trade market. They add Charlie Morton, a signing that we didn't really see coming because we thought, all right, they got their depth guy in Tomoyuki Sugano. They don't need another number 4. They probably needed a number 1. So it's those little moves that they've made that I think they're hoping are going to pay dividends. I mean, remember last year, middle of the season, they were searching the scrap heap and wondering if Gene Segura had anything left in him. And they gave him a shot in AAA that lasted about a week or so because they were so worried about their infield depth because they were hit with so many injuries. And if that happens again, this team is going to be a lot better prepared than they were at this point last year.
Yeah. And I've struggled talking about this offseason a lot just because, I mean, you have to a lot, but like it is not the normal way to go about like team building or like the accepted or like the popular or whatever word you want to use. Like, and like, it might not even be right to have done what they did. It is incredibly unique to spend as much money like in the near term as they did. And like, I always am like, when you see like, oh, they only have one player under contract for 2026. It's like, yep, they're going to non-tender Gunnar Henderson. Right, not under contract. Like you got us. Like,
yeah. Not technically under
like,
contract.
Literally give me a break. But it's not bold. Like, because it's like bold, there's a world where bold is like, I'm going to pay Blake Snell like $30 million 5 years from now. I'm like, I don't really care because Blake Snell's gonna be my rotation this year. It's gonna be awesome. We're gonna sell Blake Snell jerseys. He's gonna pitch on opening day. Like he'll make 22 really good starts, and like hopefully some of those are in October.
Yeah.
That's bold. Like bold is also being like, what do we need? Like, do we have like the conviction to do this? Like, because this is what we think we need. And I'm really, really interested to see how it works out. I'm not gonna say like this is going to be like, how it's done going forward. It's not like right. There's always like the next team that gets bought by like a really, really, really wealthy ownership group is probably going to go out and like do what Steve Cohen did, not what David Rubenstein, Mike Elias did. Like this is something that's very unique that's happening here. The Orioles have that luxury though, because of the core we were talking about, like that batting practice group of like these absolute like dudes that they took at the top of these drafts when they were terrible, who they hit on and like hit on in more ways than one as like players and people, and they have a lot of leeway to do what they think is right based on that. Like, but there's no selling that it's going to be right. Like you are not going to say like we got our money's worth on Ramon Laureano or Tyler O'Neill if this team wins like 88 games and doesn't win a playoff series again. Right. Like you're not going to be able to say that, even if it's true, even if like Tyler O'Neill's a 2-win player and like him and Heston Kjerstad combined for 48 home runs and you lose in the wild card round. Like, sorry, nobody's going to think this is the right thing to do, but like, that's not really like, it seems like a risk they're worth taking. They think is worth taking. And I'm really fascinated to see.
Yeah. I mean, you have to, when you're in the Orioles position, you obviously have to build a roster that you think can win in October, but you also have to get to October 1st. And the Orioles made the playoffs pretty easily last year with 91 wins, but they want to have a better roster. They want to have more than 91 wins. They want to win the division.
Yeah.
That should be your goal in the short term. And maybe once you get to July and you're saying we have a really, really good roster, but we still need that ace. Nobody has still stepped up there. Then that's maybe when you'd make that trade to try to get an ace. But you have to get there first. And I think that what we saw last year was when all of these guys went down with injuries, they didn't really have too many ready-made solutions. I mean, the injuries hit the rotation last year with Tyler Wells and John Means, Kyle Bradish. Their solutions were Cole Irvin, rookies Cade Povich and Chase McDermott, unproven Albert Suarez at that point. If injuries right now were to hit this rotation, knock on wood, let's hope it doesn't happen, you have a more experienced Cade Povich, a more experienced Chase McDermott. You have maybe Trevor Rogers when he's healthy. Question, maybe. More proven Albert Suarez.
Yeah.
Last year, injuries hit your lineup. The second half, we saw Westberg go down. We saw Mountcastle go down. Ramon Arias went down. Your solutions at that point were trading cash for Austin Slater, who had already been on his third team in the last 3 weeks.
Yeah.
Trading for let's be honest, pretty washed up Eloy Jimenez, who could only DH. Picking Emmanuel Rivera up off the scrap heap. He ended up playing 27 games for this team down the stretch. Levon Soto played 12 games for this team.
Yeah.
So Kobe Mayo was a rookie. Jackson Holiday was a rookie. If injuries hit your lineup this year, you're talking about Ramon Laureano, who's an experienced big leaguer, had a good run in Atlanta last year. You're talking about Dylan Carlson, who is former top prospect. You're talking about a more experienced Kobe Mayo. You're talking about a more experienced Jackson Holiday getting more run this year. You have much more depth in the lineup. And then in the bullpen.
Can I pause?
Oh, yeah.
Can I pause?
No,
Like,
absolutely.
also, like, I don't remember exactly when. I think it was July, but like there was no Jorge Mateo. And like you're not gonna find me like sitting in front of a well of cameras being like, the Orioles need Jorge Mateo and Ramon Arias. Like, I'm not at that point. But like they have proven themselves like valuable time and time again.
Right.
Like all these guys were like, when they needed them to cover for Jackson Holiday after Jackson Holiday didn't really kick on at the beginning of last season, they did it. Like these are guys who, Ramon Arias was like arguably their best hitter in August. Like, and then he sprained his ankle and then he was out in September too. Like those are the types of guys who, like, all those guys you mentioned are going to be parts of this, but like they're a really, really like good safety net to have at this point. And like they didn't even have that. Like, yes, they lost Jordan Westberg, but like they also didn't have for all of September like the two guys you would have played instead of Jordan Westberg in an ideal situation if you didn't have Jordan Westberg.
Right.
Those are the types of things. Like, how many backups do you need? A soccer team, I like Tottenham, like they had all like they had like 3 center backs get hurt all at once, and the manager's like, they kept getting asked, like, how many do you not have enough? He's like, how many do you need? Like, we can only play 2 at a time. So like, how many are we supposed to have? Like 6? Like,
right.
You can only have so many, but like, if you have good backups, like you should feel good about what happens when you play them.
Right. My only experience for soccer comes from Ted Lasso, but I agree with the sentiment. I mean,
yeah. It's instead of being an American, my manager's an Australian who says mate a lot, and everyone likes it.
Let's get Brandon Hyde to start saying mate.
Mate,
yeah,
no doubt.
Yeah, I mean, it for the fans that when we get to April or May or June, and Jorge Mateo is hitting 225 and Ramon Arias is going through a cold stretch, that are like, why are these guys still on the team? Well, guess what? When Jordan Westberg, like last year, when Jordan Westberg broke his hand right after the trade deadline, you need that guy. When when Ryan Mountcastle goes down in the second half, you need these guys that can add some depth. I mean, we said Emmanuel Rivera played 27 games for this team down the stretch after he was picked up off the scrap heap. He is still on this team, but he's not going to make the big league roster.
Yeah.
So that is how much deeper this roster is right now, and particularly the lineup. They play 162 games. I mean, you hope the Orioles won't get hit with nearly the same kind of rash of injuries that they did last year, but you better have an answer when they do, if it happens. And we talk about the lineup, we talk about the rotation, the bullpen too. I mean, you look at the additions that they made that probably are going to fly under the radar. The Andrew Kittredge signing was a big one. Last trade deadline, they had to trade significant assets to get Gregory Soto and Sir Anthony Dominguez. You don't want to be in that same spot this year where you're having to trade some of your lower level prospects, some of your higher level prospects, robbing from your future
Yeah.
in order to get some guys. So, last year we saw injuries, struggles hit the bullpen down the stretch. We saw Birch Smith. We saw Matt Bowman, who's still with this team, but probably not going to make the big league roster. Yeah. You feel so much better about the depth that they have in that bullpen. And no, they may not have a lot of movable pieces. If guys struggle, they may not be able to move guys down between AAA, Norfolk, and the big leagues. But they have a lot of proven veterans, and they have a lot of arms in that bullpen that you feel very good about going into opening day.
Yeah, and as we were talking about Felix Bautista, I was thinking, who closes if he's a week behind? Like, who closes? And like, the answer is obviously it doesn't matter, but like,
yeah, right, for a week.
Yeah, but you can say, like, you can tell Yennier Canoas or Anthony Dominguez, like, we know you can close, and like during the season when Felix is like needs a day, like, you guys will be the guys to do it. But like, you could say, like, I want you to get used to when the phone rings in the 7th inning, like, I want you to get into that rhythm, and like, we'll let Kittredge close a couple games and then be like the Swiss Army knife, after that. And like, that's a reasonable thing to do. And it would be like demonstrative in a way of like how many different guys they can have to do a lot of different jobs. I think, and I've said this before, and I'm just going to end up repeating myself like constantly as we do this, because I only have a few thoughts that as longtime readers will know, I just have a few thoughts that I keep saying.
But they're very good thoughts.
Thank you, Paul. I always think back to like Michael Givens in like the 2015, 16, like really good Orioles bullpen eras, and they had a bunch of all-stars, Darren O'Day, Zach Britton, Brad Brock behind them. Like, the biggest outs of those games were when they could bring Michael Givens in the 5th inning with 2 guys on when Ubaldo ran out of gas, and like he would come in with 2nd and 3rd and 1 out, and he would get 2 outs. Like that, yes, they won because like the guys after him closed the game out, but like also they won because they didn't lose the game in that moment. And like, that's not going to be any of those guys you mentioned, any of these like up and down, like journeyman relievers who are pitching in those moments this year. It's going to be somebody who's really good. It's going to be somebody who's an all-star. Like, Gregory Soto is like, could be the first lefty out of the pen. He could be the 3rd lefty out of the pen. He could be used for 2 batters to get out of a jam. He could be used in the 8th inning on the days you need him to be. Like, Keegan Aiken is somebody who almost struck out 100 batters last inning and last year. And he could be the 3rd lefty in the bullpen. There's just a lot of different ways to go about it every night. And Brandon Hyde has done his best managing when he has had weapons that he knows he could use in certain situations and deployed them in good spots.
Right.
When he has to use so-and-so in this inning because the Orioles are winning, and like, that's when things get a little sideways. But if he knows like, it's ground ball situation, like, I need to go to Dylan Tate, like, Dylan Tate would get the ground ball because that was what he was there to do. People who are clear roles, clearly defined roles, and like aren't overused usually do those roles well. Yeah.
And what were you, from a lineup perspective, what were you expecting Brandon Hyde to do with Eloy Jimenez, Austin Slater, Emmanuel Rivera, Livan Soto last year?
He played the guys he had, and like, they all had moments where it was like, I think every single one of those guys like helped the Orioles win a game, but like, not on the aggregate of like, here we're winning a lot of games because you're here. It's like they had moments, but like, you need more than moments.
Yeah, which is what you expect when you get guys for cash considerations.
Yeah,
it's not much more. And the Orioles,
cashy considerations.
That guy is always on the move. The other nice thing is that the Orioles might be in an inverse situation from last year, where last year, as the season wore on, they lost more and more guys. That'll happen. Injuries will happen to this team, obviously. But they're in a situation right now, looking at down the long lens here, where they could be getting guys back as the season goes on. They're going to get Jorge Mateo if he doesn't make this opening day roster because of recovering from Tommy John. They could be getting him back early. Going to get Felix Bautista back, who wasn't on the team last year. Going to be, hopefully, if everything goes well with their rehabs, getting Kyle Bradish and or Tyler Wells back. I mean, those are pieces that you're going to be adding to this team. No, I'm not going to go out there and say like, well, it's this. They don't need to do anything at the trade deadline because they're getting these guys back. But they are going to be nice to have when, you're in August and September and you're dealing with the dog days of summer and guys are hurt. So maybe the Orioles are in the inverse situation.
Yeah. And when those guys are targeted to come back from the second half, like, that is a time when it definitely happened in 23. And I feel like the Orioles wanted to do it a little bit last year, but like, that is a time when you can go to a 6-man rotation. And like, there's going to be a lot of people, on the older side of things in the rotation, and like, who are getting, I don't think Grayson Rodriguez has like a full season under his belt in a while. Like even somebody like him at the top of the rotation, like
it has been a while. Yeah.
You are going to want to give these guys some time. Like you're going to want to spread it out a little bit, and to be, to be able to spread the rotation out, to be able to give guys an extra day. Like that's something that really worked out well for the 2023 team. Like Mike Elias, basically said, as I think he was talking about Jack Flaherty, he's like, we were able to go to a 6-man because we traded for him. And like, that was really helpful. And like, that's why we won the division.
Right.
I think there's a way that they could do a lot of things they want. And we will spend a lot of time talking about like whose spot those guys are going to take when the time comes. And like, these things have a way of working themselves out. It's just going to be good to have those pitchers back when they are.
Absolutely. John, I want to talk about the article that you wrote, Inside the Dugout, where everybody can subscribe on the BaltimoreBanner.com, about the vibes at spring training, because, this team is largely the same from last year. There's no, the guy that's drawing the most media attention is Tomoyuki Sugano, because a ton of Japanese media is following him and following his every move, as they will be a lot of this season.
Yeah.
But there is no Corbin Burns that is drawing national attention, that is drawing Ken Rosenthal and all these guys to come down to Sarasota in order to watch them. But it's a really talented team. And the term that you used to describe their personalities, I loved. It was like a Lemony Snicket turn of phrase, which was uniquely charming and charmingly unique. Why is this team that way?
I don't know. I mean, I think if you want to like go really deep into it, like I think they put a lot of like value into like how guys are when they're evaluating and drafting them. Like, yes, they've selected and like acquired a lot of good baseball players. I don't think they could have in a million years envisioned like that they would be like
best friends.
Yeah, all like as close and as like
living in a house together.
Yeah. I mean, and like this is like as I was writing, I was like, is this how it is everywhere? Like probably guys are buddies like everywhere, but like I think that like the like unashamed nature of like them being buddies and like going to Disney World and doing Star Wars stuff and like all this stuff is like they're just like doing it on Front Street. Like it's all right out in the open for people to see. And this is a team like when we talk to them about like learning lessons from playoff losses and like they get all serious. And, like, yeah, we learned a lot of lessons, but like this is like they are who they are. They haven't changed that. And they haven't changed how they're going to approach things offensively. And they haven't changed like how they're going to value players roster wise. They haven't changed a lot of things like organizationally based on those things. And like, I don't know what it would look like if they went and were like, you know what, we're like, we're going to have a facial hair policy and like everyone's going to work out in full uniform every day. And like, we're going to be like,
Buck Showalter era.
Yeah. It's going to be like, some like military type camp because like this is unacceptable. Like, I don't know what that would look like. I don't think anybody would really enjoy that. Like maybe it would work, but like same chance of it working as what they're doing now. So I just felt like, and especially it sunk in on Sunday, it was kind of like a camp day. Like a lot of people went to the first road game. A lot of the core players stayed back and like, they were just like, I truly think that like the way that this team continues to get better is like the way they are, and to be the way they are, like as people and as players, like Adley Rutschman and Gunnar Henderson are also like leading the stretch line. Like they're going to be like joking around and like wearing their shark tooth necklaces and like all this stuff. But then the time comes and like stretch line happens and like they're the first two guys in there. Like
exactly.
They start doing their sprints and like they're there. They're leading the charge. It felt really, it just feels really genuine. And like I was hesitant to write it because like who really cares? But like I think I've heard from more people about it that do care than I thought about, because it's just not normal. It's not normal to have this happen. And like, it's not normal to have a team whose culture is like this, like so out in the open,
right?
There haven't been like any kind of issues, period.
Yeah.
Like and it's just really strange that that's the case. And like that it continues to be the case. And that's weird to say because we shouldn't be like expecting guys to not like each other.
Right.
They all do.
They all do. They like each other more than a lot. I mean, I talked to Zach Eflin, who was traded for last year, hasn't even been on the roster a full 12 months. And he's a 30-year-old veteran. He's pitched in multiple organizations, Philadelphia, Tampa. He's gotten big contracts before in his past. He's been around young groups. He's been around veteran groups. And he immediately was invited to live in the house with Jordan Westburg, Adley Rutschman, Gunnar Henderson, Colton Cowser, Ryan Mountcastle. He went to high school with Mountcastle, so that was his in. He was a couple years ahead of Mountcastle in high school. But he said he's been on other teams, and it's not always like this. I mean, it's unique. He said if so long as you come to Camden Yards every day and you work hard and you're a good person, he specifically said, and you're a good guy, you'll be accepted here. And that's something that he noted is unique. That's, a perspective that has been in other clubhouses, and notes that it's not always like that. And does that, always translate to wins? Not necessarily, but this is a really talented team.
Yeah.
They're really talented. They care for each other. They play for each other. And right now we're seeing them at their goofiest. I mean, they're coming off an off season where they just went to Disney World.
Yeah.
They're, living in a house together. They're in spring training, so the games don't matter. They're silly. Adley Rutschman's like posing for the camera every time I try to take a shot, and he won't let me get a candid shot of him. They're wearing their shark tooth necklaces. This is when they're at their loosest. And I think that's good. I don't think that they should be coming. This is not a group that is, like you said, that is the facial hair policy, that is all these grizzled vets who have $200 million contracts. It helps that I think a lot of these guys haven't gotten extended yet and haven't had to deal with the weighty pressure of $300 million contracts on their back. They haven't had to deal with the pressure. Yes, they've lost a couple playoff series in a row, but it hasn't gotten to the point where it's like the Yankees every year and they're like, well, you haven't won a World Series since 2009. When are you going to do that? They are a loose group, and that's just, they're not going to change who they are. And I don't think anyone should expect them to, because that would be asking them to be somebody different.
Yeah. And I think there's a part of it too, where, it feels like it's almost like a drastic, and I'm not going to, I think last season kind of like wasn't like a switch flipping and all of a sudden they were just like serious and like not having as much fun. I think a lot of things contributed to that, but like, it does feel like there's a huge gulf between like the way they are and like the perception of what you need to be able to like grind out October baseball wins. And like, that might just be like a too far of a pendulum swing. Like, I almost wonder if they just need to like continue to lean into it and remember like what got them there when those moments come.
Exactly.
But I think it's also important to know, as I'm thinking about this now, that like when we're in the spring training clubhouse, you have like basically like different eras of guys in there. It's like there's not like a million different like cliques or subsets, but like, in that same wall of all these guys we're talking about, Heston Kjerstad has his locker, and like there's a lot of guys he spent time with in the minors, and like Kobe Mayo is like a bridge to the Enrique Bradfield, like Dylan Beavers, Judd Fabian group, and like there's no difference in how they act or how they carry themselves. And
Cedric Mullins is on that same row with Jordan Westburg and Kobe Mayo and all those guys.
Yeah, and they're seeing how these guys carry themselves, and they're seeing how they act, and they're asking these guys questions, and they're getting answers. And I think that is, I think there's almost like a permission structure to exactly what you said. Like, be yourself. Like, don't be a jerk, and like you're gonna probably do well. And like, you have examples of people who have done that right in front of you all around.
Yeah. I'm going to be fascinated to see how the new guys fit in as well. I mean, I think, Tyler O'Neill, from what we've seen already, is fitting in pretty well. I think Tomoyuki Sugano, honestly, is going to fit in pretty well. I mean, obviously there is the media hype around him. There is the age difference. He's 35. A lot of these guys are younger, but I think this clubhouse is going to embrace him if they haven't already. And I think that he's going to enjoy being here, because what did he say when he first met the team? Let's go win a World Series. And this team, as goofy as they are, as much as they like hanging out with each other, they're serious competitors. I mean, the part of the reason that, things went sour in the second half is because they were probably putting a lot of pressure on themselves because they wanted to win so badly.
Yeah.
So they care. They are guys that really care about winning.
Yeah, I really like felt it when Adley Rutschman told Andy Koskin the story that he's like about how much he hates losing. It's like almost like
you hate losing more than you like winning.
Yeah, I understand that intimately, and I and I was like, yeah, like I get it, I understand it. Like, it makes sense. But Sugano, I believe, is doing some golfing with a lot of players. That's
nice.
Kind of, he's bridging the gap. He's doing some. Him and the translator share a cart, and a couple other guys share a cart, and
golf is the universal language.
Yeah.
That's what they say.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of words that you can say after you hit a golf ball that everyone understands just based on the sound you make.
Yeah, exactly. Well, we got a lot more spring training yet to be played. It's about a month until opening day. Stuff could still happen. Roster moves could still be made. We are going to be with you through it all. Banner Baseball Show. Give us a like, give us a thumbs up, write us a 5-star review, and I'll read it out here on the show.
Still waiting for one.
Still waiting for that. We have 2 5-star. I've read them out in the past.
Okay.
But yeah.
All right.
We're getting some.
That's good.
Don't, let's speak it into existence. Let's be positive. It's spring training.
I just want to hear one.
But somebody's got to write it. Thanks so much for tuning in. At John Meoli is his handle. I'm at Paul Mancano and at All Banner Sports. Thanks so much for tuning in. We will be back at some point next week. But in the meantime,